We've been cataloging things to understand the environments we come to shape as complex assembly. Our global context is just one story, involving people and institutions, economies and systems, politicians and clients, landscapes and organisms, local technologies and global materials. These actors and their complex ecologies are simultaneously the sites and agents of transformation. We start from the things around us. The crane is a constant on our horizon. The noise of incessant construction, maintenance, and demolition forms the soundscape of our cities. The waste generated by urban metabolisms of extraction and consumption will inevitably arrive to the dump of the periphery. This pattern is true in the capital of Europe as it is in urban fringes of Mongolia. We shape the sites in which we live and work through our material culture. Sometimes, the legacy left behind is toxic. Like how the asbestos, meant to protect property from fire, is actually detrimental to our bodies. We continue learning lessons about the architecture of well-tempered environments. We are also thinking about the temperature of the urban. In Ulaanbaatar, the coldest capital city on Earth, about 60% of the population live off-grid. Coal is central to life, but is also the source of dire environmental and health issues. The smoke engulfs everything. We start to measure the environment in terms of micrograms, planning around the pollution in the air. And we begin to calculate distances in relation to accessibility of water. The presence of water is perhaps the key indicator of quality of life. Evidently, access to green space is just as important. Plants determine the climate and atmosphere of a place, but plant can also mean to fix in place. Can we study roots and the idea of rootedness as another way to understand our surroundings? Arriving to Albania, we discovered their native plants were no longer being cultivated and only growing in foreign nurseries. In Mongolia, nomads no longer travel across the steppe and have settled in the city, where the traditional gears components are distributed in the market, commodified as stock and inventory. In China, life is also tied less and less to the land, in the traditional agrarian sense. In just a few decades, the countryside has rapidly urbanized. The home, shared by generations, is abandoned as family members migrate for education or employment opportunities. So to understand processes of urbanization, we should trace how things move. The trucks, the cargo, the high-speed rail, the commuters, the flights,
女士们、先生们，我们的飞机很快就要着陆了，请您再次确认您的安全带是否扣好，谢谢。Ladies and gentlemen, our aircraft will be landing shortly.
to conceptualize how a site has transformed and will continue to shift. We examine the infrastructures that enable the flow of goods and people, the logistics of production and distribution, the patterns of work and leisure. How can we speculate on the institutions that regulate capital of other forms? The emblematic towers in the financial district of Brussels, like those in Manhattan or those in Hong Kong, reflect a global economic model of investment and commerce. But the vacancies that have beset the World Trade Center for decades point to weaknesses in the status quo. We look for these situations, gaps, anomalies, or failures, as possible points of departure, where the turn towards a new direction is possible. The marquee is an indication of a threshold, a hypothetical event, the possibility of entering into another reality. For almost 2 decades, Albania has been negotiating the entrance into the EU. This political endeavor has become, in part, an aesthetic project through the installation of artworks, political gifts, historical fragments, as the construction of cultural capital. Can curating be a form of statecraft? The sign, by German artist Thomas Demand, depicts a scene from building the world of tomorrow, a handshake at the World's Fair to symbolize the partnership between the people of the world by consumerism. We perceive of periods by referencing historic moments and the figures and policies that shape our society. We register the passage of time through the generic forms of the everyday by reading the vernacular as an ongoing construction of economic and social forces. The Plaza Luxury Hotel in Tirana is the first tower in an ambitious master plan for the capital. Where the notion of private property developed only after the collapse of communism in Albania in 1991. The rights to land were granted to Mongolian citizens in 1992, when the constitution was revised. Citizens quickly erected fences to claim the 0.07 hectares of property allocated by the new law. In China, the hukou policy identifies citizens as rural or urban in the register, which determines eligibility to own land and access healthcare and education. Could we explore the thresholds of a site not in terms of its physical extent, but by its internal logic of ownership and enclosure? What does it mean for space to be truly open? How do we construct collective well-being? In a period of containment, we have become acutely aware of spaces in between, as distance and stillness become necessary norms. In Albania, the call to prayer had been silenced for many years. Following European occupation in World War II, the dictatorship had outlawed religion. Today, the sounds in the square and the music throughout the city carries the history and culture of Tirana and the harmony of its people. Their discontent, however, becomes expressed in the streets. A public domain allows for difference and freedom of use by the occupants. With the speed and intensity of transformation from the global level to the local, new notions of collectivity emerge in the face of uncertainties. What ideological shifts will our current crisis set in motion? The paintings, mass-produced at Dafen Art Village in Shenzhen, proliferate an idyllic image of the rural. The landscape is flattened, much in the way that nature is bound into an experience in the form of the landmark. Abstracted from the ecological processes and livelihoods entangled with it. Unlike the sheep that have traveled with nomads across the pastures of Mongolia for centuries, the Kashmir goats, whose numbers have quadrupled in the last 2 decades since deregulation, dig and chew up the grasses. Overgrazing, combined with climate change, have led to severe desertification. In the complex ecology of things, how do we participate in processes of evolution? If context is an assembly of things and their agencies, how do we shape our material environment or influence immaterial conditions? The nature of change is unpredictable. Through the construction of kinships across scales and dimensions, we build new realities. By transforming along with the things around us.